Welcome to one more edition of Politics Done Right. I'm here today with Dr. Dean Baker. He's a senior economist with the Center for Economic and Policy Research. He is the co-founder, in fact, of this group. His areas of research include housing and macroeconomics, intellectual property, social security, Medicare, and European labor markets. He is the author of several books, including Rigged, one that is a must-read, Getting Back to Full Employment, and several others. Dr. Dean Baker, it is my pleasure to have you on board. Welcome to Politics Done Right.
Well, thanks a lot for having me on.
Absolutely. So now recently, one of the reasons that I contacted you is that recently you wrote an article for the Huffington Post with regards to rents, with regards to patents, and why is it that within our Medicare system, our Medicare for all, what we're talking about Medicare for all, you thought that Elizabeth Warren was actually doing the right thing in the way that she decided to frame the discussion around it. So first of all, why don't you explain to us your thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, most immediately, there's been this big, ruckus, at least among people who are following the Democratic primaries closely. Elizabeth Warren has frequently been asked by reporters, are you going to raise taxes to pay for Medicare for all? And she repeatedly says costs will go down. So they asked her, well, does that mean you raise taxes? And she keeps going, cost for middle income people will go down. And this is being reported as an evasive answer. And I originally, I'm policy wonk, I want to hear, okay, lay it out. And gave it more thought. And I thought, no, this is exactly the right answer. And these reporters are playing this kind of gotcha game. We want to get you to say you're going to raise taxes, and then we're going to run around saying Elizabeth Warren's going to raise taxes. Well, most people, I understand. You have people that just hate taxes. They don't care. They don't want to pay taxes. They don't care if they're getting free education. They don't care free Medicare, free health care. Raise my taxes, that's the end of the world. That's not most people, and certainly not most people who are going to be voting in the Democratic primary. They care about their cost. And that's exactly what Elizabeth Warren is saying she's going to answer. Now, she doesn't have a fully developed plan. I know she said she's working on one, and we'll see it when it's out. But she's focusing on costs. So if you tell typical middle class person that for their family they're going to pay another $5,000 in taxes, on the other hand, they're going to see their insurance premiums, including those paid by their employer, fall by $10,000, along with their co-pays, their deductibles, or other costs. I think most people will be very, very happy with that story. But they want just to be a story of taxes. And there's no reason for her to play that game. She's teaching reporters how they should cover the issue. Talk about what matters to the people who are going to be voting.
I think that is so important. Now, you took it a step further, and I think what you did, you explain it in the form of the other costs by having private health care, by having drug costs based on patenting, etc. It is a very difficult subject in the manner in which you say it in a shorthand manner. Rents and what the cost of having a monopoly on a drug. Can you try to express that in a form that everyday Americans can understand that, in effect, they are paying a huge tax to private corporations, not only because we as American citizens have post-developed most of the drugs that they have out there, but also because they have a right to charge as much as they have because competition is kept out of the game.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And it's something that people have a hard time getting their hands around, primarily, I think, because it's reported so poorly. The way in which the government pays for most research and developing new drugs is by giving patent monopolies. And people have a hard time, we talk about them all the time, like they're just there. Well, they aren't just there. The government gives them out. And the way I would argue, and I think it really is just the only logical way to think about it, is we could think of the government as alternative ways to pay for things. And in the case of prescription drugs, we actually do spend about 45, might be as much as 50 billion a year on biomedical research, primarily through the National Institutes of Health, but we also have the Centers for Disease Control, various other agencies. It might get as high as 50 billion. I haven't seen the latest figure. On the other hand, the private sector, private industry pays for a lot, and they're awarded with patent monopolies. So that's a way the government pays for prescription drugs. We tell Pfizer, we tell Merck, we tell the other drug companies, go out and develop drugs, and then we'll give you a patent monopoly so you could charge whatever you feel like it. You aren't subject to competition. So that is literally how we pay for it. So when we hear these stories that someone has cancer, life-threatening cancer, and there's a drug that may help them, but it costs 150,000, 200,000. It doesn't cost 150,000, 200,000. That's what the drug company is able to charge because the government gave them a monopoly. We'll arrest anyone who competes with them in the market. Actually, what it costs them to manufacture it, almost invariably drugs are cheap. It's $300, $400, $500. We know that. We know what
Right.
generic drugs cost. So the government's imposed this enormous burden on people with its patent monopolies. And instead of treating that as, oh, that was something the government did, we treat somehow that that's a fact of nature. And then we turn around and then, oh, and now the government wants to interfere with it. And you go, no, that's
Right.
180 degrees wrong.
Now, interestingly, when we talk about patents or whatever, you had an interesting solution, and coming from an economist of your caliber, a capitalist, all the works, you actually played into my domain, if you will, because you said, suppose instead of giving the drug monopoly to the pharmaceuticals, the the government just decided to pay for the research. The government just decided to pay for all these things. Invariably, the drugs would be cheaper. I want a response to that, and then I want to tie a more important question to that thereafter.
Yeah, well, that's exactly right. So suppose, again, we have numbers from the industry. They spend roughly 70 billion a year on research, give or take. So suppose we'll pay for that up front, and we could even pay it to Pfizer, pay it to Merck. That's fine. I mean, I wouldn't have the government, create the government commissar of drug research. Pay it, have them bid for it. Just like, I'm not a big fan of the military necessarily, but they do develop weapon systems. So you do it like a weapon system, give them a 10, 12-year contract. You're going to do research on cancer drugs. The other company's going to do research on diabetes drugs, whatever it might be. And all the research is fully public. So as they're doing it, what that means is other researchers can benefit by it. And then when it comes out, a finished product, it's in the public domain. It'll sell as a generic for a few $100s. Totally gets rid of this problem of high drug prices, which is just an absurd situation we create for ourselves, because this isn't just, oh, do I want the new iPhone or something? It's people's life, it's people's health. And it is only a problem because this is how we've decided to finance prescription drug research.
In effect, then, an economy isn't divinely designed. It's actually designed by human beings. And so we can make it however we want to make it. And in that light, the question that I have is, shouldn't we decide to have a bifurcated economy? In other words, there is a portion of the economy where we should minimize profits for the better good. In other words, as you said, have the government fully develop, pay for the development of drugs, have the government work on developing doctors, make it be a private side that does it, but have all these issues solved on one side that really makes things like healthcare a right, and that everybody has equal access to healthcare. Why don't we bifurcate our economy in a manner like that actually is humane?
Well, I think it's both humane, but it's also, just to be the economist here, I would also just say it's efficient. I mean, that's not the highest goal here. We want to make sure people have health care, but the current system we have is unbelievably wasteful. I mean, anyone who's ever had to deal with themselves or someone in their family has a serious illness, the billing, all the hoops you have to go through, that's not about giving people health care. Giving people health care is the doctor, the nurse's assistants, looking after them, giving them the drugs they need, the medical equipment. That's the giving them health care. All the hoops that we've created because of, really just a very convoluted system, that's just complete waste. So, I mean, of course, our first focus is making sure people get the health care, but we've added this enormous layer of waste that does no one any good except for the people who make a lot of money off it. But it's not providing a service to the economy or to
Well,
the people. I should put it.
increasing entropy always allows others to make a hell of a lot of money, and all the vested interests right now are in here trying to protect it. So I want to ask that question again. Should we then have a bifurcated economy where we decide there's a portion that is fine to have free laissez-faire type markets, but then there is a portion that really should be not profit-based, but controlled for the better good of the American citizens and, hell, the citizens of the world?
Yeah, no, the only reason why I'm hesitant with bifurcated is because I guess what I just say is you want different rules for different areas. So clearly we want different rules for healthcare than for producing iPhones. And even though we don't guarantee everyone healthcare now, we do recognize, I mean, we do have Medicaid for low income people. We do ostensibly recognize that people should be able to get healthcare. We do a very, very poor job of that. But again, no one I've heard of has proposed that we have a special program to make sure everyone has an iPhone. So we already recognize that. We just do a very, very poor job of it.
Now, lastly, what would I'm pretty sure based on where you stand, you support Medicare for all. If you had to make the pitch to the American population, and look, you know how economists work. You're an expert. You can talk about marginal propensity to consume and all these other things. The problem is most Americans aren't there, and they're easily frightened. As an economist talking to the American people, tell them why Medicare for all is the option they should choose, and that private insurance companies are likely the most inefficient method of paying for the product. Or not, I can't believe I use product for healthcare.
Paying for
Paying for
healthcare.
healthcare.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, I guess what I'd say is that what we're interested in is making sure that people get health care. And private insurers do provide health care, but it's a very ineffective method. And people have had to deal with their insurers know that. I mean, again, if you're in very good health and haven't had much occasion to deal with them, then it doesn't matter to you much one way or the other. But most people, if not themselves, someone in their family has had to deal with insurers. And again, this is an unnecessary layer. So what we want is the minimum amount of bureaucracy, if you like, getting between people and the healthcare providers. And the private insurers are a massive layer of bureaucracy. And I could say this part as an employer, so it's not just from the standpoint of the patient. They have to deal with the insurer, whether they'll pay for their drug company. But as an employer, we have consultants. I'm no longer the co-director of the Center for Economic and Policy Research, but I was for 18 years. Mm-hmm. We had consultants that helped us navigate the insurance system. And frankly, there was no reason for us to be involved in our employees' insurance at all, but that's the way the world's set up. So you have layer after layer after layer of bureaucracy in this system, which if you had a universal Medicare type system, that's all gone. So we're talking about getting people health care in the most effective possible way. And Medicare does that well. It's not perfect, but it's done a very good job at this point for 50 years, or at least the over 65 and the disabled population. We'd like to do it for the whole population.
And, interestingly, we hadn't even talked about the doctors' offices who have to hire that many more staff to navigate through the insurance companies that they have to do. And as you've just pointed out with your own company, you've had to have another layer of either consultants or employees to work that through.
That's exactly right. And again, the idea is, at the end of the day, we want to make sure people get the health care they need. All these other people are unnecessary. So you want to minimize these unnecessary people, have the doctors, the nurses' assistants, the technicians, the people who have to be there to provide the health care. And after that, you want as few people as possible involved in the process.
Dr. Dean Baker, it was my pleasure to have you on Politics Done Right. Thank you so kindly for your time. And please keep up the good work. And please keep writing those articles because America needs that voice right now.
Well, thanks a lot for having me on, and I certainly intend to.